The Democratic Alliance launched its election manifesto on the weekend. The party has its eyes set on winning the country's economic hub, Gauteng. DA leader Mmusi Maimane joins me now. Good evening, sir. Thanks very much for your time. Can I ask you about that? What you think of that video, of that pastor?
Good evening, Vuyo and fellow South Africans. Firstly, I think the authenticity of it must be investigated. But as a Christian, as someone who shares a deep faith, it becomes very difficult when sometimes people abuse their positions and use them for that. I think it sometimes puts credibility of the church on the line. But the church in general has done some incredible things in our nation. It's been an institution that's helped so many get an education. So I don't think we should also use that to judge the entire church community from wherever it comes from. I think we need to interrogate the uniqueness of that case and deal with it.
You don't believe it just from what you saw, that it's actually
no, I don't.
What happened
I must be honest, I don't. I have seen miracles in my life, but that doesn't look like one, I must be honest.
Okay, see that. Now, just going through on the day, you saw, I know probably didn't because you were on the stage, while we were covering that, some of your colleagues expressed some reservations about how you went about launching that manifesto, in that while you made what they deemed to be a political speech, you perhaps robbed many South Africans of, actually hearing about the actual manifesto.
Not at all. Vuyo, what's important about our manifesto is that we want to build one South Africa for all. The speech on Saturday needed to understand for people why we need one South Africa for all. We come in a country where 4 out of 10 adults don't work. We live in a country where political parties are seeking to divide citizens on the basis of race. And therefore, I needed to make sure that South Africans understood that that is the struggle. The struggle isn't only it's about fighting against corruption. It's about actually building an economy that can deliver a job in every home, an economy that police can be honest and serve people. So I felt the weekend, not only did it articulate the struggle for a generation, that we want to live in a post-liberation era South Africa, but it gave a hope and a vision for the future and an actual plan as to how we can do that.
I was particularly struck by your numerous references to, shall I call it, the past. In particular because your party always criticizes the ANC for always making references to the past. But the way you started your speech talking about life under apartheid, how your father struggled and sacrificed to raise you, the release of Nelson Mandela and all of that. Why did you deem all of that necessary, given your stance all along that you should be businesslike and focus on what needs to happen, focus on the future?
It's an important dream because the speech puts at the center of it a vision for the future. We need to understand the fact that our parents, certainly people in our community, suffered much. And for them to be betrayed today by those who sell off our struggle by simply just for a bottle of booze or for Louis Vuitton bags is destructive to that. And therefore, when you speak to South Africans about their past, it's so that they understand the fact that another accusation that often is made of the DA is that we're not conscious of where our people come from. Our people come from a deep and a painful past. They don't want a party that will be tried at a state capture or in Bosasa. What they want is a party that will govern, build a capable state to address that historical injustice, but to build a future upon which all of us can prosper, which is one South Africa for all. So it became very important. So I spent some time on that, but I really do feel that more than anything, the speech laid out our vision for South Africa.
Let's talk about your vision for the economy.
Yeah, our economy.
What are the major characteristics?
Absolutely.
Of your
we want to put a job in every home. That recognizes that 40% of our households don't have any income coming into them. Therefore, to address that, we want to stimulate micro-enterprise. We want to make sure that key sectors like manufacturing, agriculture, and other sectors of the economy can be able to attract the appropriate jobs that we need to put on the table. We want to ensure that young people who are unemployed can get a year's civilian program where they can intern, learn skills, and be able to go forward from there. we then move on saying that safety is a crucial component of addressing that. We want an honest and a professional police service. That's about making sure that the best police work and that provinces have a key influence on what happens with the police. We want citizens to be owners of land, and therefore we roll out title deeds and articulate how well DA governments are focused on ensuring that citizens can be owners, because property gives you an economic platform upon which you can build your prosperity and transfer wealth from one generation to the next. We focus on the eradication of corruption and making sure that those who are corrupt are locked up for 15 years. And then lastly, it's about how do we accelerate the delivery of basic services around two key components: education, which is preparing our kids for a future, and ultimately healthcare that makes sure our citizens go to a facility where they can get the appropriate healthcare.
Link your stance on property ownership to land reform.
Land reform is crucial because ultimately we've shown the fact that you don't need to amend the Constitution that speaks to private property ownership. You don't need to amend that. What you simply need to do is to have the willpower to execute around land reform. That's about making sure historical injustices are addressed. You can transfer land back to ownership of South Africans. You can ensure that black people and white people can work together in agricultural land to create share equity schemes where people can be able to prosper and create growth around the agricultural sector. It's also about saying that ultimately restitution and that principle can be settled in a legal manner that upholds the value of that land but addresses that historical injustice.
Where there are deadlocks and people can't afford going to the courts?
Yeah, this is where it's key. This is where the state intervenes in being able to say, let's take the matter to a court, because the courts are the most capable people to settle the question of compensation. Because
but
if
it's
you
not
give
easy to access courts for financial reasons.
We must make it easier for our people, because already we adjudicate a budget that is given to land reform. If you give that power in the Constitution by saying you will expropriate without compensation to politicians, you and I know very well, and citizens at home know, that in fact politicians will adjudicate that land for their personally connected people. We're already seeing it as a practice. Let's allow our independent judiciary to be able to adjudicate the just and equitable compensation, and the courts have already asked us for that, and what we want is for citizens' rights to be protected by an independent legal system.
Now, where would all these policies you've just quickly gone through because of the time we have for this, where would they have emanated from? Because from what your former policy had said in her resignation letter to you, she was often hung out to dry in the face of unhappiness with policy within the party. There were untouchable policy areas, and no budget was designated to the policy unit.
No, that is, let me recognize this one thing. Firstly, we're a party that's been in government. You cannot govern without policy. Our policy on ESCOM is what even the ANC are now trying to emulate. So there were already policies on the table. Already, as we go, we have a blueprint for South Africa.
But her argument is that they couldn't be changed, but that's not how you approach policy.
That's not true. We passed policies, fresh ones, as early as last year at our Federal Council, where in fact we adopted new policy around how do we attack corruption. For example, introducing blockchain technology. That's a new innovation. How do we look at a question of immigration, which was already on the table, and that's something that we've been discussing. How do we ensure that our jobs policy, for example, gives a person who's sitting at home a voucher rather than staying on a housing list? Those things were already being developed, already in place. We were looking at an economic model, and I think the offer we've put on South Africans, thanks to a contribution not only by one individual, remember we've now got people in government in different parts, have contributed to the policy-making process. It can never be reduced to one individual. This is a party process that ensures that we put the best vision for South Africa, our blueprint, our agenda for change, our plan, that when we come into government, these are the changes that we want to make. So I'm comfortable that this offer reflects the aspirations of the broad people who have contributed to our policy process.
So she was lying.
It is not. It is, our party is much bigger than that. Our party is much bigger than just one individual.
So she was lying.
She's not. She's part of a process. She is part of a process, and our party has got more contributors to our policy process. And I think some of the issues are not reflected accurately in that letter.
Okay, Mr. Maimane, thanks very much for your time. For now, Mmusi Maimane will, of course, be interrogating the Democratic Alliance's policies further.